What things did you do as a kid that you now realize is extremely weird? There were spiders and mice in my room which totally freaked me out, so every night, before I went to sleep I'd whisper a report of what the weather was outside to encourage them to go outside, rather than stay inside, and bite me in my sleep. That is so cute. Rather than wanting them to be killed, or refusing to sleep in your own room, you just told them the weather instead. Super cute. When I was in 4th grade, so around 9 or 10 at a private school, we used pinto beans as counters during math. Well, one day someone realized if you put a bean in water, it would sprout, and it became incredibly fashionable to keep a couple living bean sprouts hidden in your desk at all times. This turned into a whole industry. Sneaking to the cabinet in the back and stealing the beans was risky, so people took on those roles. The beans were old, so getting them to actually sprout was valuable. Others would sneak the sprouts in and out of class to get sundae. A boy's grandparents had bought him a science experiment kit that came with hundreds of these little plastic vials that stood up on their own. They were the perfect size for keeping a sprouted pinto bean, so he started trading them. Another two kids had water bottles with a straw that fit neatly into the vials and made it easy to water the sprouts. They turned it into a service. One pretty talented group of girls started making houses out of paper and cardboard for the sprouts to live in. This allowed bean families to become a thing. Another girl realized that the houses meant there was a market for bean sprout furniture. Kids starting pulling textbooks out of their desks and stashing them around the classroom to make space for larger and larger houses. The houses were a turning point because they ran anywhere from 5 to 10, which was the first time anyone had charged real money for something instead of bartering. In addition, demand for sprouts went through the roof, since you could fit 4 or 5 in a house. The kid who had been successfully sprouting the beans is under immense pressure to produce, and we've crossed a threshold, so people are willing to pay real money now. Into this high pressure situation walks my classmate Julia. Julia brings a tiny bottle of purple liquid one day and tells Bean Sprouter Kid that it's the diluted slime of an extremely rare snail from the forests up north that she collected herself while camping with her family. It's such a strong fertilizer, even diluted, that one drop in each vial will guarantee that a bean will sprout. In addition, a drop to each already sprouted bean will ensure a nice green plant. There's enough for around 50 sprouts in there, but it's going to cost him 20 for the whole bottle. Well, if you're selling the sprouts at 1 each, 20 is a steal. So the kid comes back the next day with the cash. Julia gives him the fertilizer, and he puts a drop in each vial just before we leave to go home. The next day, all his bean sprouts are dead, and he's pissed. Turns out the fertilizer was just Julia's mom's perfume, and it killed all the plants. Well, Bean Sprouter Kid is not the kind of person to take this laying down, so he goes to the teacher to tell her that he got conned, and the whole thing unravels. The teacher is upset that her students have been devoting hours of in-class time to beans. Parents are upset that money they thought was for snacks or field trips was for beans. The principal has to announce to the whole school that growing plants in your desk is now banned, which just confuses everyone else. And my class is angry at poor Bean Sprouting Kid for snitching and ruining everything. All their hard work is now in the trash. The bean sprout industry never recovered. 8 rose petals. My grandfather told me they are edible. I still eat one when I go visit his grave. Purple was my favorite color, but I didn't like the word, so I called it Murderlop. Found out that the air had germs in it and tried not to breathe too much. I remember asking the teacher if we clap, are we killing germs, knowing full well what would happen. A class full of 9-year-olds clapping like morons to kill the evil germs. I used to host imaginary science shows where I would get questions from viewers that I had to answer. I don't remember a lot of the questions from my fake audience, but I remember trying to explain that glass actually could let air through, and that was the explanation to how we didn't suffocate when all the doors and windows were shut. Young me did not know a whole lot about ventilation. Edit. I also remembered something else now. My mom worked as a nurse, and she sometimes let me take syringes home with me. both with and without needles. Don't really know how I feel about that nowadays. Though, I sometimes took a bit of everything from our bathroom shower gels, shampoo, whatever fluid I could get my hands on basically, and I filled a mixture of the shit and put into a syringe. I then sneaked around the apartment and chose my victim a paw plant of some kind. I injected a small dose of the magical elixir into the paw plant. Super happy this didn't develop some sort of mental disorder for me later. I used to eat ants. I didn't even like the taste, and I kept doing it. I used to steal things from my sister when she was mean to me, and then hide them by sewing them into her stuffed animals. She found out a few months ago and was really freaked out. I used to have science experiments in the bathroom sink, meaning I'd go to the bathroom and lock the door. Once in, I'd make sure the sink drain was shut and then proceed to add every cleaner, chemical, shampoo, etc. under the sink to the sink in hopes of a reaction. Never got one, but it also never stopped me from trying. In hindsight, I probably could have killed myself if I had mixed the wrong stuff. I obviously didn't. I used to eat tissues as a kid. My mum found out one day and yelled at me to stop. As any sane parent would do, so I started eating them in secret, sneaking away with the tissue box to another room to eat a tissue or two, until one day, when I was about 5 years old, I had to go to the hospital. I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was that I had trouble breathing through my nose. Before my operation, I was in the hospital and I overheard one of the nurses say that they just needed to remove the excess tissue in my nose. Naturally, I thought that the tissues I had eaten had started getting clogged up in my nose, and I never ate a tissue again. I made the realization at 14 that it was muscle tissue in my nose and not the actual tissues I was eating. When I was around 4-5 years old, I remember I used to sneak downstairs very early in the morning and search for any cups with that of cold, sweet, sugary coffee in and drink them before anyone got up. Guess I may have been the youngest caffeine addict in Britain. A few years ago, I was visiting my aunt and uncle, and they had some old film from the 80s of my extended family on a camping trip. There was a full playset there, including a trampoline, and my mother was filming my cousins and I playing. I'm not sure why my aunt and uncle had the tape instead of my mother, but whatever. I was about 3 at the time, and my mother panned the camera away from my cousins playing on a swing set towards me on the trampoline. Except I was lying face down on the trampoline, full on thrusting my hips into it as hard as I could. Now, I don't specifically remember doing that, but I have a pretty good idea of how my little mind worked at the time. I'm certain that I was just trying to see if I could build up enough force to lift myself off the trampoline mat or flip myself over. Still, not exactly the best thing to be watching with your aunt and uncle, who threatened to save it and show at my wedding. Jokes on them. I pocketed the tape when they weren't looking. I used to waste a shit ton of water by turning on the shower and lay on the floor next to it with a towel over my body and fall asleep with a tiny bit of water splashing on my face. I used to imagine I was in a cave and it was raining outside for some reason. Are good times. Not me, but my partner used to keep kiwis, the fruits, as pets. He would name them and take care of them until his mom took them to blend into a smoothie. That was a rude awakening for him. Our girl used to sit back to front on the toilet to pee. My reasoning was that way it sounded like my dad peeing, and then the monsters wouldn't try to grab me. Childhood anxiety is wild. In grade 1, we would sit in a group on the floor in front of the teacher while she read us stories. I would sit at the back of the group against the wall and pull my pants halfway down my bum. I liked feeling the cool ground wall against my bare butt. When I was in elementary school, I would use one hand to cover my butt when I showered, because I was afraid that a monster would warp through the bathroom wall and attack my butthole. Several friends and myself had a fascination with writing in code. We had little pocket notebooks full of codes and deciphering instructions also in code, and would write volumes of notes between us in code. Notebooks got confiscated by a teacher. We wouldn't tell her how to decode. She tried to get us in trouble. Parents thought it was hilarious. I'm almost 60 and I still had one of these notebooks around somewhere. Wearing velcro strap shoes so tight they'd probably cut off the circulation in my feet because I was worried my shoes would fall off. I used to eat butter straight out the tub too. My 5-year-old niece has started doing it. Maybe it's a family trait. I would walk out the bathroom after taking a shit and spread my ass cheeks to whoever was in the living room and ask, "Is my butt clean?" One time it was the guy cleaning our carpet. I used to eat mechanical pencil lead. No idea how I got into that habit, but I think I enjoyed the crunchiness of it. Did it for a little while, but showed a classmate and she immediately went to the teacher who then called my mom who scolded me and told me to stop. Goodbye 0.7 millimeters. You will be missed. Running any lollipop or sucker I ate under the faucet water after every lick because somehow it tasted better after being rinsed lol. Had an imaginary friend that I would make bets with that I was guaranteed to win. The prize being ludicrous amounts of imaginary money. Hey Joe, I bet you $1,000,000,000,000 I can hold my breath for 3 seconds. God, I was rich back then. For much of 2nd grade, for some reason, my parents let me pack my own lunch. I had 2 sandwiches of choice. One was what I called a triple butter sandwich, peanut butter, apple butter, and butter. A little strange, but okay. The other was a lettuce sandwich, white bread, mayo, and a few leaves of iceberg lettuce. I have no idea how they let me eat that for most of a full school year. When I was a kid, in the 80s, I had very strict teachers. Any form of backtalking or, God forbid, swearing, would get you a quick slap and a fast march to the head teacher's office to explain yourself. My teacher once sat me down for a talk, as happened fairly often, which was basically her just berating me. In the middle of this she suddenly stopped and told me I needed to keep my eyes under control because I had this terrible nervous habit of twitching my eyes when she was talking to me. In actual fact, I was tracing out imaginary swear words with my eyes. Basically, drawing out things like, piss off and shut up. Tracing the letters with my eyes, as if they were right in front of her face. I didn't realize she could see my eye movements. I don't know why. As an adult it's obvious that my eyes were darting all over the place and looking crazy. But child me thought that it was subtle enough that it was unnoticeable. And that I was being super sneaky. As soon as I realized she could see it, I stopped. But looking back, probably the funniest part to me now is how much it must have unnerved her, and she never did know the reason for it. To her, I must have just been the weird kid with the crazy eyes. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe,